Welcome to Pilgrim Church. It is January 17th, the 44th Sunday in non-ordinary time. Now I know this week has been more non-ordinary than usual. So let it all go for right now. Center yourself on this time of worship and allow God's grace to touch you. We begin with an opening hymn, O God of Strength. The words will be on your screen.
Our contemporary reading is by Sam Sanders, host of the NPR show, It's Been a Minute. The title is The Lies We Tell Ourselves About Race. The images from the Capitol this past week made something clear. A noose hanging outside the building. Inside, insurrectionists carrying a Confederate flag. Members of the mob wearing t-shirts that read Civil War. Our current troubles and our current administration are both just the latest chapters in America's ongoing battle over race. Trump's presidency has always been about race and reacting to a nation more diverse than it has ever been. We've been reminded of that time and again since he announced his candidacy. So how can anyone still say, this is not who we are? Why do we continue to hear that same lie as the worst of America rears its head? Once you see it as such, it all makes a lot more sense. Remember, Trump began his ascent to political power on a racist lie, birtherism. He launched his campaign for the presidency calling Mexican immigrants criminals and rapists. His first major policy initiative was travel restrictions on Muslim-majority nations that felt a lot like a travel ban on people with darker skin. His supporters cited economic anxiety as their motivation, but they were driven by racial animus.
As we gather for prayer here at Pilgrim, we always begin with our gratitudes. And this week we have had these gratitudes sent in from Bob, grateful that his parents got their vaccine today And they were on the local news. If you were in the Birmingham market, you might have seen them. For all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
I want us to be grateful for having each other, for being a part of Pilgrim, and for the guidance as we meet an annual meeting this afternoon for this church, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
Teresa asked us to join in gratitude that she got the vaccine this week, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
And she's also grateful that we have more daylight, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
For our concerns, some of our members, Janice and Ralph, are still struggling with COVID, and now their son Matt has gotten out of the hospital and is staying with them. He's also struggling with COVID, so we want to be holding them in our prayers. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
Teresa wants us to remember Jamie, her nephew, who remains very ill. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
John asks us to remember Tracy. Her father has COVID and is on a ventilator. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
Another friend of John's, Glenn, she also has been diagnosed with COVID. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
Teresa asks us to remember Dale, who has COVID. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
And Teresa asks us to remember Mac, who has lung disease. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
And finally, I want us to hold in prayer our nation, the impeachment, the violence, the inauguration. We need to surround all these things happening in our midst with God's grace and love. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
Let us join together as one as we go before God. We are so grateful for these moments, oh God, to gather with friends, with our congregants, with those who we love and care about who are not in this room but who are stretched across this nation and around the world. We hold each other in love and in concern and care as we face the things that are challenging our world right now. Some are very personal, some are global. Some make our hearts race with joy, and others take our breath away. But it is your presence, O God, that holds us together. And it is our community that holds each other together. And we are grateful that we have these things that we can rely upon. So as we hold this time of worship, as we open our hearts and lives to your touch and presence, as we try to be the kind of people that make a difference, may your presence open us, guide us, heal us, love us, and give us courage to face this future without fear. For we are yours, and we claim your presence as we offer our prayers, our blessings, our concerns, in the name of Jesus, who taught us to pray. Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy dominion come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the dominion, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Sitting or standing, let us offer our reverence for the word from God, found in the Gospel according to John, chapter 1. Jesus expands the disciples' awareness of grace. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you come to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." Listen for the word from God.
Thanks be to God. If you have ever had the thought, "I want to understand theology better," then the first chapter of John's Gospel gives you lots of ways to test that thought. It is full of descriptive names for God and Jesus. It plays some common assumptions of the day against one another, so there is clarity about like who John the Baptizer is and how Jesus relates to God. There are lots of qualifiers and contrasting ideas to prevent confusion, which ends up being quite confusing at times. There is a great deal of theological density, particularly in the first 2/3 of this chapter. But then we get to our reading for today. Now, we discuss a lot here at Pilgrim at how difficult it is to talk about God because none of our words can really capture the reality. We try to find ways to express our experiences. We try to find ways to describe how it changes us or impacts us or makes us different. And so we have to use metaphors. We have to use descriptive kinds of terms, but none of them are ever good enough. So we end up doing things like saying God is like. And sometimes Christians hold on to a particular term that they like a lot, or that their particular congregation seems to use a lot. Some congregations, for example, really like to think of God as Father or Jesus as Lord. And those descriptions, those metaphors are used in the Bible and they work as well as any others. The danger is that our metaphors can become idols if we forget that they are metaphors. That is why, even though it is difficult to do, here at Pilgrim, we intentionally use lots of metaphors to talk about God. And it makes us trip over our tongues, and it makes us say the Lord's Prayer differently from each other. And in that moment of discomfort is an opportunity for grace. Now, in our reading for today, we usually hear this pericope as a description for how some of the first disciples received their call to ministry and met Jesus. And indeed, that is what is going on. But while that is going on, you might have missed how Jesus was also expanding the understanding of metaphors and how they are used to better understand God and to better understand our experience with God. You remember in that reading, Nathanael declares, when Jesus said, I saw you under a fig tree, Nathanael says to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. That was kind of an odd thing to say, don't you think? To call somebody the King of Israel, who's a peasant preacher from out in the country. But Jesus says to him, you know, your mind is open because I told you a truth you already know. Here's another. I am the Son of Man. Now, I intentionally chose a translation of the text that kept the patriarchal names because the progression is fascinating. Son of God and King of Israel are long-time messianic attributions. They are metaphors that made sense by connecting ancient Jewish theology with the early church audience, because the early church was almost all Jewish folks. So Jesus chose a different name that challenged how the Messiah would be understood. And it challenged the assumptions that surrounded what God was doing among them. See, this is why we embrace inclusive language here at Pilgrim. Why do we change words that we heard growing up or that the faith tradition we were familiar with used them all the time? And it's because Jesus showed us how. Metaphors tell us what something is like. When we discover our metaphors are also limiting, we can either change our metaphors or add new ones, or do both, like Jesus did. You see, the larger our understanding and our concepts and our attributions to how we experience God's grace, the more that reality is available to bigger parts of our lives, bigger parts of ourselves. The more metaphors we use, and the more intentional our metaphors become, and the better we come to understand that none of the metaphors are complete, the better chance we have of experiencing what we can't put into words. So in our text today, we see a progression of metaphors. Son of Man is better than King of Israel, as the church was becoming much more Gentile. And so they had no concepts of those old Jewish stories. Chosen One is better than Son of Man, because gender wasn't the really important quality that was trying to be described. Something will eventually replace Chosen One when a new metaphor jars us into new recognition of some aspect of God, or an aspect of Jesus, or an aspect of grace that we have overlooked or that we have diminished. You see, in religion and in religious traditions, metaphors are best when they are jarring. When they no longer jar us, it's time to find some new metaphors. Because non-jarring metaphors easily become idols. Now, this is a part of Judaism all the way back to the beginning years, when the ancient rabbis quoted Deuteronomy and noted that God is like an eagle who helps her young to fly. Someone surely in that congregation got huffed in disgust. Did you hear that Rabbi just called God a bird? Put your listening ears on, people. Rabbi just said God is like a female bird. Is he crazy? It is jarring to our concepts when they expand our imagination of God's presence. And let's face it, we prefer small, containable ideas of God. We like for God to be manipulated by our ideas so that God fits our predetermined concepts, our predetermined understanding of how God acts or doesn't act. We covet the lie that we can contain God to our own image, instead of realizing that we are made in the image of God. And we have no idea how that image of God will expand and deepen and jar us out of our complacency. And isn't that one of the primary reasons we come together as church? When God's presence jars us out of our complacency, we need each other to catch us and help us process and love us through our resistance and tell each other our own stories of jarring revelation. With each new insight comes new mission. With each new revelation that God expands our consciousness, we discover a whole new area of life that needs our attention, that needs our love. With each awakening to depths of grace we had not experienced comes the joy of knowing this journey, this process includes us. But it can still be scary to take, so we do it together. Now, John's gospel, more than any other gospel in the Newer Testament, is the most jarring. And John doesn't get it perfectly. I mean, let's be real. This gospel was the last written, and it is the one furthest away from Christianity's Jewish roots. So we find it also to be the most racist when delineating Christianity from Judaism. Again, that is why we take this journey together, to listen to whether the messages that are offered give us insight or simply rely on old bias, whether there's a fresh understanding or somebody propping up some old tropes. You see, grace has never been limited to one human voice. It is best exhibited and best received in the body, in the communal and community experience, that wisdom that is tested by time and prayer. Now, I will admit that we as a nation have known nothing else but jarring over these last 4 years, and particularly this week. Just keep this in mind. Much of what has torn us apart as a nation has been because one voice dominated our national story. And that voice used old tropes and stereotypes that pit us against our neighbors. And he pretended that his metaphor was the only one that counted. To use a different metaphor, he played the song that horrified us, that so many of our neighbors wanted to dance to. His jarring metaphor didn't bring out the best in us. It didn't cause us to dream new dreams or expand our awareness of grace embrace. It used our fears against us. It made us mistrust our neighbor, and it turned leadership into his own ego gratification. Our nation needs a new metaphor. We need to figure out who we want to be and to develop ways to live that vision. But it will not come, as Sam Shepard reminds us, by pretending that our story hasn't been lived in all of its honesty. So it is in this experience of what is going on across our land that draws us back to our text from John and our experience of being a faith community. That together, grace has the best chance of jarring us to a new insight. That is why worship is so important. It takes the focus off of me and places it on God's presence among us. That is why community is so important. We try out our metaphors and help each other trust our truth and to let go of our brokenness. And we need courage to allow God's grace to jar us again, even as we survive some of the most jarring years of our nation's history. But you see, my friends, we get to choose. Choose grace's nudge to expand your heart and awareness. Trust God's presence to jar you alive as we rely on each other to hold each other through this process. This I know with all faith, that the story is to continue. The awareness, the grace, the community, the presence of God is not done with us yet. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, we offer an opportunity for contribution to the work of Pilgrim Church. For those in remote attendance, ways to give are shown on your screen.
closing hymn is Will You Come and Follow Me? The words will be on your screen. Before we go, I'll remind you of a few things happening in the life of our church. The Pilgrim Book Club meets every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. via Zoom. If you would like to be a part of that, just let me know. Send me an email, and I will get you the Zoom link for that. Also, this Sunday, if you're watching this on Sunday morning, following the service at 11 a.m. via Zoom is our annual congregational meeting. The information will be on your screen. It is a link, a Zoom link you can just call into or on your computer. All the files and the reports for this meeting have been sent out to everyone. So if you received the mailing earlier that has all this information and you have responded to that, then you are already linked in. You'll get a notice right before the Zoom meeting happens that you can use for that. If you didn't, you can simply go to our website and you can find the link there for our congregational meeting. The Stump the Pastor continues to happen on Tuesdays. If you've got a question you think might stump me or you just want to hear what I have to say about it, send it to me. My email address is available on your screen, and I'll be glad to try to get stumped or not stumped by you. And now as we prepare to leave from this time of worship, to go back to the chaos that is our world, to know that we once again have to face what's happening around us, I hope that these moments that we have been together have given you that sense of peace that passes understanding, that sense of connection that passes across space. For we indeed continue to be the church, whether through this format or any other, and God's grace can still touch us. See you next time.